Hi, Ballard. I'm Maggie Griffin, and welcome to Highlands. Come on in.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for welcoming us to your cabin in North Carolina, here in Highlands. So happy to be here and to get to share it with our audience.
Thank you so much. I love anytime we get to spend together, and especially on this beautiful mountain day.
I know, the air is crisp. Your house is so cozy. Like, it couldn't be a more picturesque day for what we're doing.
Thank you.
The weather knew exactly what we were up to.
That's right.
Okay, you just got it. We're going to jump right in. Tell me about the house, how you found it, what it was like when you bought it, what drew you to it.
So my husband and I grew up coming to this area as children. We came and visited family and friends. So we were familiar with Highlands and Casher's area. But now that we live in North Georgia and we wanted a place to kind of get away on the weekends, we bought our first cabin a little over 10 years ago. And it was wonderful. We just loved it. We came up all the time. At the time, we only had our oldest son. And then after that, we bought the cabin next door to that one. So we had little side-by-side, great, charming 1950s mountain cottages. And then our friend and real estate agent here in the area called and said she wanted me to come take a peek at this one. And so I actually came by. My husband was not with me. I had 3 girlfriends and did one little loop and said, we've got to have this. And it was just so storybook, really from the moment I drove up the driveway. I love the location. We're close to town. It had the space we wanted. So, fast forward, we sold the other 2 little cabins, and we've been here for over 6 years now.
Wow. Yeah. You've got 3 kids, 3 boys.
Yes.
So I imagine you probably needed more space, and the view is absolutely gorgeous.
It is. We spend a lot of time on the porch during really all year round. It does get very, very cold in the wintertime, but we love being inside with a fire. Yes, we have 3 boys now, so our family has grown, but we love being able to bring other little families with us too. Bringing our immediate family, but our friends and their children, and just being able to let the kids wander and have fun outside and, just enjoy being in the mountains. Whether we go on hikes or we go on nice walks, or like I said, we can walk to town. But the house just really kind of drew us in from the moment we, got here. I loved all of the character. Of course, the space has been wonderful, but the house was just built very well, and it was designed by Norman Askins, a well-known Atlanta architect, and he worked with a family. We're only the second homeowners to have the house. Yeah. So the original family was very careful and intentional on materials that they used. I loved that it had the cedar shake roof, the wood shake on the outside. The inside is filled with heart pine. Of course, I just loved all those elements from the get-go.
Yeah. It's so charming. I mean, truly every inch. And it's crazy to me that it was built in 1980. And it's obviously the materials and was the intention from the beginning for it to feel much older. But it really, really does. And I feel like that's rare.
It is rare. I totally agree. And I think that's what we felt from the first time we came to, that I walked through it. My husband came and walked through it pretty quick after, I saw it, just to, he wanted to lay eyes on it too. Sure. But it was just so much, just every little detail felt very important to us, and we liked that it felt old. We've always loved older homes, but, for it to have been built in 1980, it very much feels like the 1880s. And I think that was very intentional, during the planning process of the house too.
Yeah, so walk me through any renovations or tweaks you made upon buying it, because I imagine they were subtle. I mean, the kitchen, let's start there.
Yeah. So when we bought it, I was really careful about wanting to keep as much as I could of the original house. But, 40 years, lots of things change. It needed a little bit of love, fresh coat of paint. I brought in wallpapers and grass cloths to kind of make it my own, but still honored, some of the original detailing, like, the stenciled floors. Or everyone, comments on how charming that is.
And that was there.
And it was already here.
Yeah.
The painted floors upstairs, the stenciling in the entryway. But just really I didn't want to do anything that felt like, oh, she came in here and, and just mess this all up. But the kitchen itself was just, everyone loves the kitchen. That's the primary entrance through the friend's entrance. No one even uses the front door.
We're going to use the front door today.
We're going to use the front
door.
Yes. But just all the wood tones, all the cabinetry. And when we bought the home, all of the countertops were heart pine, which I loved, but it just felt like if this was going to be a place for us to bring larger groups, I needed something a little bit more durable.
Yeah.
So we swapped those out for a really hardworking quartz. But even just during the planning and building phase, they planned for 2 refrigerators, which we have to have when we're here. Lots of space between the cooktop and the sink because it is a primary walking area. But just room for everyone to kind of stand around the island because invariably that's where everyone ends up.
Yep.
But space for a big dining table, that was really important. And then little spots in front of the fireplace. It's just been a very cozy place for us to get away to.
Yeah. I love, there's so many touches throughout that I'm like, this is just Maggie Griffin, like all the wallpapers, but there is such a, there's the grass cloth and all the powder rooms and bathrooms have a beautiful paper on them. And that's just what I've always loved about your work, the way you mix patterns, and it has, but there's also like a really beautiful mountainy palette here that's a little bit different than what you typically do and what maybe you've done in some of your own houses, which maybe have like a slightly more vibrant palette. So talk to me about like what you were going for in terms of the decor.
I think it would have been really easy for me just to move in, get the essentials that we needed, and just start renting it. And because it is a rental property, but I really wanted more for the house than that. I wanted it to feel like an escape, not just for myself, but when people come and visit here. We've had wonderful renters over the years, lots of repeat renters, and they say it just feels like home. And so there's no greater compliment that I could get,
True.
If someone writes a lovely review in our guest book, and just to say that we felt so at home here and it felt warm and inviting. And so that was sort of really more of my approach, was I wanted it to feel fun, and I didn't want it to feel like our primary home either. I wanted to do things that were a little bit more outside of my comfort zone, like bolder wallpapers and brighter colors, but also just keep in mind it is a second home and a retreat space for whoever is here on the weekends or, renting it during the summers.
Okay, walk me through the types of things that make it feel like home, make a house feel like home right away. Like, what are those things on your checklist that mean that for you?
Well, for me, that really means more tactile things. So things like, soft upholstery or comfy bedding, nice linens, drapery, even down to, I love my pleated lampshades. But just those tactile qualities that give a layered feel without too much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like also the wood tones just really help it feel very settled and like it's been here for a long time. So whether that's the end tables or the dining table or the coffee table or, some of the little pieces that I've got hanging on the wall. And then also just larger rugs. I think, that's something that I really try to encourage with, even my clients, is just a larger rug doesn't necessarily make the room feel swallowed up. It can actually really make the room feel just that much more cozy and layered.
Okay.
So I chose a lot of jute rugs. You'll see the natural fiber. It just wears really well. And then on top of a lot of the jute rugs are old rugs. I always tell my clients, if an old rug already looks good, it's going to continue just looking that much better.
Right.
A little wear, on that beautiful rug is just going to make it just look that much
it kind of
sweeter.
makes it more charming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I do love the wood tones, the note about the wood tones, because I think many of us, if this had been our house, there's so much wood and it's all in a very specific tone and a specific, kind of warmth that it could be a challenge to think of like, do I have to only bring those similar wood tones in, or can I have a mix? So I love seeing that you've got like some darker woods,
right?
Like there's even your chairs have like a black painted, and then there's just a mix. So talk me through that, because I do think that is a place where people get stuck a little bit.
Sure. Well, I do think that mixing wood tones makes it feel more collected. Instead of going out and buying all heart pine, which there was plenty of that to go around already in the house, just kind of mixing. And I really gravitate towards simpler lines, almost primitive pieces, because I do think that they can bring in a little bit of a patina, a layer, without adding too much, overdone detail. So
you mean in this house in particular, or just in your client projects?
Certainly here, but I do gravitate towards it too when I'm outsourcing with clients. If we're looking for something a little bit older, I tend to lean towards and gravitate towards the pieces that are a little bit more streamlined. Maybe that's because I like a more handsome, look to my interiors and not something that's so formal. But that's not to say I don't love a little surprise element, in a lot of spaces too. So we were lucky enough to inherit a lot of the pieces here in the house. A lot of the corner cupboards were already here, several of the pretty beds. And I loved that it just added to the home story that I got to come in and really look after those pieces for the next chapter.
What about the plate rack in the kitchen? Because that's another very, that specific choice that is there. But you love a plate. So I'm curious whether that was something that you were excited to embrace or something that you were whether that was tricky.
Well, I'll be the first to say it's not practical. It's just very pretty. And so we've felt like keeping it because it felt like it was something that was just very inherent to the house. If I had to guess, it was built on site. It was trim built. It's made out of pine. It's been here for 45 years now, and it does give me a way to display a pretty collection, and it is just such a focal point of the room. But we've embraced it, but it has been nice to keep it, and I do think it's just very complementary to the rest of the room.
I love just how the kitchen feels like a true room, and that's partially because of the little keeping area and all the drapery and just all of the elements that you've added. But what do you think are some ways that people can get that feeling in a kitchen when kitchens can be so hard and sterile, I guess, because there's so many, there's metal and stainless and marbles and all that kind of stuff.
Well, again, one of the easiest ways to bring in a little bit more warmth is through something tactile, whether you can add a Roman shade over your kitchen sink window or a little cafe curtain. But in most of our homes that we've had, I've had a space in my kitchen where someone can sit and talk to me and, maybe have a glass of wine while I cook. And I have always loved that. And I feel like that's one of the most special parts about this kitchen is that you can really feel like you're a part if you are entertaining a big crowd and I am in the kitchen, I'm preparing a meal or cleaning up after one, and that my guests can still be right there, and we can have a conversation and I don't feel isolated. Yeah. So if you have the space to do that in your kitchen, I feel like that's always, everyone loves it, whether you have your morning coffee there or maybe it's just, you can turn on the television and maybe catch up on the day's news or whatever. But I do think that if you have the space to do it, you can. You will really enjoy it. Now, if space doesn't allow, bringing in things like a little color here and there, say it's your bar stools, or maybe you can slip cover your chairs, around your breakfast table, and just bringing a little bit of that tactile quality in and something that just feels a little bit more layered, keeps it from feeling so utilitarian.
Yeah. I mean, the house is so cozy. I mean, just everything about it. And you're right that there's a handsomeness to it. What do you think it is that creates that? Because you've got some plaids, you've got lots of velvets, but you also have lots of florals too. So what are some ways that you kind of add that masculine touch with balancing with the feminines?
So I do think there's such a balance between having, your solids that are a little bit softer hand, like your velvets or your pretty florals and your plaids and your checks. And so I try not to overthink that too much because I really do gravitate towards such a warmer color palette. Yeah. I think you can tell that. I really love, sagey greens. There's a lot of kind of a taupey beige here, not so much white. Of course, the pop of coral on the sofa is just a cheerful element, but it also is really practical in that it doesn't show a lot, in the way that a creamy white sofa would, or even a darker color that would show a white fleck or, anything fur, right. Yes. Pet fur. So I do feel like that's such an easy way, is just to kind of not overthink and bring in a little bit of pop-up color. Yeah. Now, in the bedrooms, I felt like, if these were younger people staying in there, or even, if you're visiting your friends for the weekend, just being able to just bring a smile to someone's face. It's pulling out that really cool color from the wallpaper to paint the trim, I think is always a really fun element. But there's so much great wood millwork in the house already. We've got lots of beams, and there's real shiplap here, and the really tall ceiling. So it already felt like the architectural elements were in place. So anything that I brought in, I love a grass cloth because that complements the wood to me so well with the texture. But bringing in the colored grass cloth, it's not just natural. Yeah. So like the blue in the boys' room, or, kind of the more brown upstairs. But just pulling in a couple of those layered pieces that bring in the texture. But also, since it is a second home, I'm not going to come in and really layer the nightstand or the chest. You want to keep it free and clear for a bag or a glass of water or a phone. When your guests are here, so that they can make themselves feel at home too.
Maggie, I love the palette that you've done here because, you are no stranger to color. All of your projects have lots of color and lots of different shades, but this one here feels very mountainy, feels very earthy. You've got oranges and browns and greens and blues. And so tell me just kind of, what was the jumping off point? Was it the setting? Was it an art piece? Was it a rug? Where did you start?
Well, so much of the house to me was predetermined by the architecture style. And just when I drove up and this handsome, chocolate brown house with this pretty white trim, and I just thought that was such a great way to just start from the get-go. The original homeowners had a fair amount of, I would say, red in the house, kind of some earthier red tones. I wanted to downplay that, but I also think it has its place in the mountains. So, I let kind of my traditional palette of lighter blue and green and cream sort of take a back seat here and let some kind of more earth tones come into play. I knew for whatever reason I wanted a coral velvet sofa from the get-go.
Where did that come from? You had a vision in your head.
I just thought, okay, that's so pretty. Orange is difficult. Red didn't seem right, but the dusty coral felt so right for the mountains.
And I love it with blue.
It looks so great with blue. I love it with sage green. I love it with powder blue. Those are the right colors to mix with it.
Yeah.
But then you'll see in the kitchen, just having that blue and red and cream plaid on the ottoman there is just another kind of nostalgic touch to some of the original colors of the house. But I always gravitate towards more handsome colors. I think, just having grown up in a more agricultural area, having, a dad and brothers who hunted and fished, and we kind of did all those things. I always love a plaid. I love checks. I love those earthier colors. And so also just, something that was going to hold up to renters and to our family. I do love when something has some age and wear on it. So, nothing here was too precious. I didn't put anything that would, make me sad if I had to recover or if something happened. So it just was it felt right.
I love the drapery too. A lot of the drapery patterns you've used, like the ones in here, the ones in the dining room, they have little touches of blue, but they also have there's a lot of color in it. And so to me, it seems like an easy way to guarantee some longevity, right? Because you do have blue, but you also have orange and you have green. So if, 5-10 years from now, you are sick of the coral couch and you want to go bring more blues in or more greens, you could do that. And so, but I think sometimes a bold fabric that has lots of different colors on it could seem kind of scary, to use it in a lot of different ways. It's almost backwards a little bit. It seems like a bold fabric would be really specific and would sort of cage you in a little bit, but I really feel like it's the opposite. Do you find that? Or
Absolutely. I also feel like the smaller prints can just read a little bit more casual. So the smaller prints that have more subtle color versus the really large scale florals that can sometimes feel really formal. If you've got a really large repeat on something, it can feel more appropriate for a dressier environment. But the smaller scales, I do think, give me more license on color change because everybody knows it's going to change.
Yeah.
But also it's subtle enough. It's not so loud. It kind of takes a back seat to some of the other interesting elements in the house, the architectural features, the layers in the other parts of the room that bring in texture and color. So I feel like also just because it is a vacation home, I probably wouldn't put a pattern on every drape in my primary house, but here it felt okay and fun. It's a little change from the everyday, and it's something more unexpected.
Is it more or less likely a window treatment to get damaged by a child, a renter, that kind of thing?
Not necessarily. I do sometimes wonder when they're just sort of a little off kilter. I'm wondering if there's maybe some hide and seek,
Oh, sure.
But also in the afternoons, there may be a glare for the television. But really, to me, it adds to the shell of the room.
Right.
It kind of creates a visual, a backdrop of color and pattern without being the primary thing in the middle of the room. In this space, like I said, I loved the coral velvet was just like something I really wanted, but I also didn't want to put the TV over the fireplace. I had one of my favorite artists. I commissioned a painting of our view, and it's what I would consider an abstract landscape. But I love that she brought in the colors too that are in the drapery. It has the coral, kind of that more muted color palette, even in the plaid from the chairs.
Did she know the color palette? Like you gave her the color palette of the room?
I did a little bit, but I let her just do her thing. She's so talented, so it worked out beautifully.
Yeah, serendipitous.
Yes.
Perfect. You mentioned again that it's a vacation place and a rental spot. And I'm curious, like, the house sleeps 14. And it is, 5 bedrooms? But you've really made the most of each bedroom, not only visually, because they each have their own personality, which is really fun, but you've, really appointed them in a way where you can, host a lot of people. So I'm curious, how you're thinking through that, both in this house or even with your client projects. How do you, accommodate a larger group, but still make it comfortable to where people don't feel like they're on top of each other?
Sure. So, for a lot of second homes, heads in beds is really important. How many people can we sleep? How many people can we gather around in the living room? Extra seating, comfortable seating is really important. And so I love if a room will allow for 2 beds, whether that's 2 fulls, 2 queens, I love to squeeze that in because it is such a cozy element, and you can kind of pile up children in there, or even adults are comfortable. When we decided to finish out the attic space that's now kind of the kids hang out, the trundle bed was already there, so that was nice. That allows for some spillover, but it allowed too for another queen bed. So, it was nice that we had a little bit more room, but it's been great because in the winter months when it is so cold outside, if the adults are here in front of the fire, it does allow for the children or the teenagers to have a second place to kind of curl up and watch a movie if it's raining or just a kind of a bleak winter day.
Sure. Yeah, like there's a lot of, that is one thing that's really nice. It's not an open floor plan. So there's lots of little nooks.
Right.
Which makes it so cozy. And that's a good point. When you've got a big crowd and you've got lots of bedrooms, like it's nice to people to have like some own little private spaces where you can kind of get away, where, maybe if you want some quiet time or like you can still have your own little space. So that's smart.
Well, I think maybe that's one of the things I like most about the house is there are so many walls, so many new builds now. Yeah. We're just opening everything up, which is great. And if the plan calls for that, but also, it allowed me a wall to really anchor a sofa and to have that, 2 end tables and 2 lamps. And so you can kind of feel a little bit separate, but also a part of kind of the action. Yeah. But I do think it's nice to have places for people to just be. Every bedroom has a chair, so that's nice if someone needs to just, take a phone call or wants a minute to just read by themselves. Or if you're, if you have like the luxury of having an afternoon nap, it's quiet enough, you're kind of separate and you can take that moment. But then, everyone else has a place to be. If we're outside, we can sit on the porch or we can be on the patio. So it is nice to have little places for people to go.
Yeah. Does this house make you fall in love with walls again?
Absolutely.
I mean, it kind of, because you're describing it, like there's definitely pros and cons to an open floor plan, but then also this one. And I think, gosh, just like wandering around and going down that next hallway, and I'm like, oh, what's back here?
Right.
It's so charming and so fun, and I can see how if you're here with a big group, it is so much more comfortable for people.
It's very comfortable. Well, the house, even though it is a second home, and when it was designed, it wasn't really designed with a lot of what I would consider modern storage elements. But I do think it's a very livable floor plan. You know, in another setting, another scenario, if someone wanted to have this as their primary residence, I think it could be adapted. And I think maybe it's because there are little nooks and crannies and places to be. And I don't think that's necessarily true for every second home, you know, that you would really want to live in a house like that. But, you know, my husband and I have often said, we could live here. You know, this is, it's got the space and also, you know, we could adapt it to, you know, every
We'd have to
day.
build some closets.
We'd need some closets.
Let's go through the different bedrooms and sort of the personalities of each one, because they're so unique. And I'm curious if they, you know, what was sort of like your jumping off point in each one, because they, like I said, they have their own unique personality. And, you know, where did that come from?
Well, we'll just start with our bedroom. So I wanted our room, it's right here off of the living room. I wanted it to feel a little bit more restrained on color. So there's really just a nice neutral grass cloth above the pretty shiplap around the bottom area of the room, you know, and then I just brought in a little bit of green through the drapery fabric, and there's some pretty pillows on the bed. But I love white linens. White linens always in a primary home or a second home. It's easy to clean. You know, you can bleach those, you can throw them in the wash. It's a little bit simpler. So I wanted our space to feel a little bit more maybe elevated and a retreat. But then in the other rooms, I really kind of just took license on bringing in color. So I call it our boys' room. It's got the 2 American flags. One of those was my grandparents' flag, and the other one flew above the Georgia State Capitol the day that my husband and I got married. And so it was just a fun, you know, I wanted them to have a place of importance. And so they just look great over the old pine headboards. And then with the pretty blue, it just felt very, you know, young boy-like. But then upstairs, I love when you have a home like this that embraces angled ceilings on the second floor. You know, I love playing that up. You know, let's don't try to take away. Let's actually make that a focal point of the space.
Right.
So for the 2 larger rooms upstairs, we have wallpaper on those angles, and I think it just gives that kind of cozy, enveloping look.
Yes.
You know, we love to bring that in with maybe a beautiful kind of contrast trim color, like we did in the double bedroom. And so it's just an unexpected element. And then there's that beautiful window there that lets in so much natural light. It's on the front of the house. It's that big arch. I just felt like it was such a great combination. But then I kind of used some more restraint on the headboards are just a simpler linen and the bed skirts. So, you know, again, it's just about the balance of pattern and solid and bringing in, you know, a little bit of natural element here and there. But I'm also, you know, you'll see from room to room to room, I'll throw in a little kind of funky modern piece.
Yeah.
Like in our bedroom, the 2 paintings that are on either side of our bed remind me of, it's a very abstract tree. Of course, you know, that's what I see. But I loved that it was just not your typical, you know, print or, you know, something else I could have chosen. But then upstairs in the kids' space, I just love red, white, and blue. It's one of my favorite combinations. And I think, you know, especially for a second home, it just feels appropriate. And so bringing in that pretty, it's actually a wallpaper that's printed to look like wood, which I loved. And then bringing in the checkerboard floor and the red was just it's just a surprise. You know, it's they think there's an attic back there. And then it's just a happy moment. A big sectional comfy TV. And then we painted the center kind of chimney flue with chalkboard paint.
So fun.
And just let the kids color on it. And then when it gets too full, we'll paint over it again. And, you know, it starts all over.
The thing that I think is so nice about all the bedrooms, but particularly the upstairs bedroom, you know, there's nothing worse than when you are going to stay somewhere with a big group of people, getting like the worst bedroom. And there is no such thing here. Like every bedroom, even if it's, you know, small,
right,
has a real thoughtfulness to it, and there's a design, and it's just well executed to where if you are in one of those, you don't feel like I got here late and so I got the bad one.
Right. Yes. Well, even the twin bedroom. So those were our childhood twin beds, and they're very nice 4-poster beds. We had canopies on them, growing up. But when I told my husband, I said I wanted to put them in the mountain house, and I told my mom they were in storage. She said, they're not going to fit. And I told them, but I said, yes, they will. And they fit within 2 inches of that room. Yeah. But I think there's something very charming about that. It almost feels like built-in beds with the posters and the canopy.
And you've done
slats.
the drapes and so it feels special.
Like funk, yes.
Yeah, it feels special.
Yeah.
Not sad.
Yeah.
I just love that about each room, because each one you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, like it feels like its own little escape and its own little personality, and they're each well appointed. And I think that's really important in a vacation home where you do rent it, because everyone stayed in that one room that was like the rollaway couch.
Yes, the last person to arrive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's no fun. Talk to us about the porches, because those two are, this one, you've got gorgeous views, and then you've also got a little sort of, would you say that a courtyard?
Little
like a
patio.
little patio area that's nice.
Well, our screened-in porch is really here. We use it all year round. Even on the coldest days, there's usually a warmer moment, but I love to get under a blanket and get into the swing. We sit out there, kind of escape if the children are inside the house and being loud. It's a nice place to do that. Or just to have, your afternoon cocktail before dinner starts. But really in the summertime and in the spring, there's just no place like it. Our view is really one that we love, so much. But then in the kind of fall and winter months, our patio, we can build a fire in the fire pit. If my husband's grilling, we've got a crowd here. Again, it's a place that you can sit, and the cook still feels like a part of what's going on. You're not isolated, and it is just so comfortable. And of course, on those perfect days, we can eat out there too. But one of my favorite things to do here is just, especially this time of year, the air conditioner barely runs, and just to open up the doors for the breeze. It's just magical. And we're lucky enough here in the mountains that you can do that in September. The rest of Georgia is still, or south is very hot.
Yeah.
But I love that. And that, I love, when our friends are here, the kids are playing out in the driveway, or, playing bocce ball, or kind of wandering around, and we can still hear. But it just feels very much like you're a part of it all.
How do you make the covered porch feel like as comfortable as a living room? Are there things that you feel like are must-haves for the space?
Well, lamps, to me, if you can find a place to put a lamp on a porch, immediately feels warmer. Instead of having all overheads, I do think if you can have a beautiful lamp. Now, these are, made of wood. They're made of a cypress knee, if anyone's familiar, from our farm. And then a burlap shade is just going to give you some peace of mind. There's going to be dust and flecks and things are going to happen, but that kind of hides a lot of that. And also they're weighted. They have a marble base. So if there is, it's a windy day, like I don't have to worry about them being knocked over.
Yeah.
But also I have lots of different ways to light candles. I've got lanterns out there. I've got some pretty hurricanes. I think that can kind of, add a layered look too, especially if you're lingering from kind of sunset on into the evening. But then bringing in color, that's an easy way for it to feel more like an extension of the living space versus just an outdoor area. And then outdoor fabrics, there's just so many now that they'll just last and last and give you so much more peace of mind.
You just have also made the most of each little space. You've got the, swing, and then you have sort of the seating area, and then you have like a little sort of chaise lounge. So it's sort of broken up, because sometimes I think those long, skinny porches can be challenging because it's a lot of space, but you can't just go super wide with your seating area, because then it feels so detached. So I love the way you've done that.
Yeah. Well, when we bought the house, there was a table on the porch, and it just felt like it was something, it was taking up more room than I would have liked because, again, I like to have places for people to sit. You know, we can dine right here around the dining table. We can have the doors flung open, and then we can all retreat to the porch, which I do love. But I can also sit there in the chaise lounge by myself and catch up on something or read a magazine. And my husband, he took a nap out there over the weekend during, just a little quiet moment, which is really nice too. And just having comfortable cushions, furniture that's big enough too, I think is important. A scale is right.
Yeah.
A lot of outdoor furniture can feel, a little bit smaller and not where you'd want to linger. But I love these pieces. They're from Ballard, have them forever. And they just are comfortable in scale. You can kind of pile on. There's plenty of room.
Yeah, that's nice. We didn't even talk about your little Mahjong space. Tell us about that because it's so cute and it really does break up this living room. It kind of gives you like a little bit more zones.
Sure. Well, Mahjong has just become so popular. I love playing. My family is playing. And then, of course, I'm sure people are bringing their sets to the mountains. I had to guess. And so I found a little space in our living room and had a little bench made and pulled up just 2 chairs and a table. And it's a place, of course, you can do other things there too, puzzles or read or, just...
You could work remote.
You could work, right.
Do it, yeah.
Exactly. Or you could, have a little snack there and it spill over for a meal too. But I just love that it was another cozy spot. Again, I created one at my home, my primary house too. And I just think it's so much fun to have a little game spot.
Yeah. It is always surprising to me. I feel like designers do this so well. Just breaking up the space into smaller, this isn't like a huge living room, but you still added an extra little spot. So many times I would have thought like, oh, will that make it feel too small or break it up to where it feels disjointed? But it obviously doesn't. And I always love the vision of a designer who can really see that. Do you feel like more furniture makes it feel bigger, I guess?
In a lot of ways, absolutely. And so many of the designers that I grew up admiring, if you look at their spaces, they have squeezed a lot of pieces into one room. But that makes the room, to me, multifunctional. If it's just 2 people here, then they can sit there and play a game or they can, sit on the sofa. But also if you have a crowd, you can kind of lounge on the floor. You have more chairs to pull up. I just think it makes it more... the possibilities are there, which I love. A lot of the designers, the decorators that I grew up seeing in magazines or in books, you would just look at these living rooms and they had so many pieces of furniture, chairs and tables, but it also just gave the room more diversity on use. Right.
They were much more complicated floor plans. You think of like Bunny and Albert Hadley and some of those. When you look at the floor plan, it's like, there's so many pieces and it's not, it doesn't look formulaic, I guess.
Right. Well, kind of to your point with those designers, they were doing kind of these, beautiful, larger, kind of rambling homes. But how do you make a room feel cozy? You bring in lots of different places to sit and little moments in a space, and you bring in those layers of layered rugs and drapery and not just have all the furniture pushed up against the wall.
I know that is what every designer says. Don't push your furniture up against the wall, but it's so hard. I don't know. There's something about it where I just am like, how do I float this? I haven't,
Yeah.
That's why we need you, and we need to come see your houses.
Well, I think too, it's probably season of life. When you have little kids, you want to have more room for them to play.
Yeah.
My coffee tables have always served as jumping points.
Yeah.
So if you walk through my home, I have nothing on any coffee table because it would just get, tossed off.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Because me too. I'm like, I'm not going to style this.
Right. There's a season for that. It's just not right now.
Yeah. Okay, good. Giving us some leeway to not style our coffee table, unless you have us over, of course.
Yes.
We talked about, you're a lover of antiques, and there were a lot of antiques here already when you bought the house. Most of them you've kept and worked around. But I'm curious, you're such a collector. You have such a great eye for antiques. But how do you edit yourself? Do you edit yourself? I mean, it looks edited and put together, but I imagine you can always find a place for something new.
Well, yes and no. I do think that one of my favorite things here especially is I have edited so much because it is a second home and it's being rented. I want people to feel comfortable. But also I think that's what they love too about the house. So there's a little balance there, but I'm constantly moving things around. If it's working for our family and the way we live here, or if there's just, things that I need to get rid of, or, things that I just feel like it's time to, move that or let that go. But I do think that bringing in lots of different eras of pieces or wood tones or styles of things just makes a house feel more permanent. It just makes it feel like it's been here longer. And this one definitely does. I think it already felt that way when we bought the house. But just honoring the things that were here, we were lucky enough to inherit some of those pieces from the original homeowner, which I think is just so fun that those things can still tell the story of the house. But when we bought the house, I needed some things. And so my husband and I, we were kind of going through the storage units, or if the family members had anything that they were willing to let go of. And so some of it was just out of pure necessity. But we took some things from our other little cabins, recovered a lot. That's an easy way just to freshen something up. And I can tell you the story of a lot of the upholstery that's here that was either, my mother's or things that I've had for a long time that just get, a little new life with a new piece of fabric.
Yeah.
But even in the foyer, the chest there is not a fine piece, but it did bring in a warmer tone with the wood. And then the pop of orange, I think, is very unexpected. And I just thought it was so fun with the, the mix of the plates that I've got hanging there. And I kept a rug. I didn't put a rug there. I kept it free of a rug because of the original stenciling on the floor.
Yeah.
It's just so pretty. And that type of artistry and craftsmanship is just fewer and farther between right now. So I just loved that. And the same for the painted floors upstairs.
Oh, love them.
And in all the bathrooms.
Yeah.
So all the bathrooms have painted floors. We renovated a little bit by adding in tiled-in showers and fresh plumbing fixtures, but all the vanities and all the floors are original to the house, and then just added in some fun wallpapers. Just kind of carried that same feel and that same look through the bathrooms.
Yeah, I love the painted floors. I feel like that's something that you don't see as much these days, and it's practical on top of being beautiful and charming and giving a house that is old, but not as old as it appears, but it really gives it, so much charm. But it is practical because it gives like a little extra water resistance to a wood floor, especially in a bathroom. I mean, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I imagine so many people would balk at going in and painting gorgeous wood floors.
Well, I've been so surprised at how well they've held up. And again, this house is 45 years old, and I don't think anyone has ever touched up the floors. But
you didn't repaint them at all.
They look fantastic. They were here just like that. And the finish is so pretty and it's not chipping. And I agree. It's just such a overlooked way of really preserving a wood floor. I know that, yes, to your point, a lot of people would say, why would we paint over these beautiful floors that we've just put down? But I think it brings in that fun element of surprise and that little bit of whimsy. The stenciling, is very true to the style of the house. And I couldn't get rid of them.
Yeah. It also upstairs, I think, brings a little bit of a lightness. And these aren't particularly dark floors anyway, so it's not, it may not have been heavy at all, but there's like a sort of a lightness and an airiness to it, being that lighter color that maybe makes it feel not bigger, but just lighter and more open.
I agree. I feel like too, in a lot of the homes that I've admired over the years that were sister parish, she loved a painted floor.
Yeah.
And really, I didn't let it deter me either from bringing in different color as well. I sort of just let them be a neutral on the floor. Of course, I have rugs, but, the floors are yellow and green, which is, not always the easiest color palette to work with, but I just ran with it, just embraced it, and I think it works. And I think it's, again, just one of those fun little moments that you maybe wouldn't have in your primary house, but it makes it feel more fun.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to editing a little bit, because you're talking about how every time you come up, you tweak some things, move some things around, get rid of things that maybe aren't working. But what are the types of questions that you're asking yourself when you are deciding? Like, what's the thought process when you're either in a room or looking at a shelf and trying to decide what to peel out? Because to me, what you don't put in is so important, but also so hard, and especially to look at your own pieces with an objective point of view.
Well, I think we've probably all stayed in a home or been a visitor to someone's home where you really didn't have room to even put your toiletry kit on the bathroom counter. So first and foremost, just utility. Sometimes, it's nice to just have a cleaner surface so that people can kind of spread their things out. Same for the kitchen. We don't have a ton of storage, but I feel like, if you do need to have things out, make sure they're useful. What is out is something that you would need to grab anyway. The coffee, the K-pods, the spices, the olive oil, because those are the things people are going to be using anyway. Yeah. And keep it a little bit freer of more just simply decorative things. Right. And I try to do that at my own home too. If it's a surface in a bathroom or a kitchen or really anywhere, making sure that it's still able to be used and not too crowded to really just also have a place to put down the water pitcher or a stack of plates.
Making sure that what is out is useful and not decorative, not simply decorative, but maybe it's both.
Maybe it's both, yes. And if it can be both, of course, that's the best combination.
I think something that you do so well, especially in this house, is like the shell and the bones of the room has so much visual interest and texture and warmth that then you don't have to add a layer of accessories to create the interest. And so you can leave the surfaces a little bit more, sparse and edited. Sure. Because if you didn't have the wallpapers and the pattern drapery and the, all the pattern in your upholstery, then you'd have to create that interest somewhere. And so then it's sort of like, okay, well, now you're going to have to do it on the surface. But you don't have to do that.
Well, I think that's the sign of a great house, right? It's just a house that doesn't, the shell, the box of it was already so wonderful, the backdrop. So that anything I added was just kind of, icing on the cake. But to me, even when I'm advising my clients, don't skimp on maybe those architectural features up front. Take your time on the design, interior section or portion a little bit longer if you need to, but make sure that the background is right.
It's like you don't have to do as much to the decorating if the shell and the architecture and the box is perfect. Yeah. I think that's such a great takeaway because so many times we might talk ourselves out of the grass cloth. I think grass cloth is especially one where like it is a texture, not a pattern. And so it could be easy to say, I'll just paint it the same color with paint.
Yes.
And so it's easy to talk yourself out of that and to say, okay, I'm just going to do the paint and use my dollars to do something else. Where, if you do put the grass cloth on the wall, then there's just this magical quality about it that like you won't really be able to get with those layers later.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think, in the right places and with the right treatments and colors and combination, paint has its place. Obviously too, and can create some really interesting moments. But if you can bring in texture, there's really no substitution for that.
I know. I just like the way the grass cloth sets off the pleated lampshade and the frame on your art. And it just there's nothing like it. Like it just really makes a difference. And like these fabulous wooden platters over here. And they're the perfect backdrop to each of those things. Love every single inch and could spend all day and probably will spend all day wandering around and making sure I'm absorbing every single detail. It's just, you're just so good at what you do. And
well, thank you so much. It means the world to me, though, that you would love this place like we do. And it is just such a happy place for our family to come up on the weekend. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, I've already texted my girlfriends like, when is our girls' weekend and can we do it here?
Yes.
It's fabulous. So thank you. For more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to both the Ballard Designs podcast, How to Decorate, and our YouTube channel so you never miss a house tour.